Thank you, Edney. Thank you so much. This is a great moment to have a conversation with, in fact, the people who will lead Europe in the next few years, maybe even few months. So it's important, after hearing from the investors, hearing from the politicians, to hear really from the people who cares, and we care about you guys. We want you to be without any filter and to tell us really how you see Europe, how you see Europe today, how you see Europe tomorrow, what are your wishes, and when you will, because we don't have a lot of, it's already quite late in the afternoon, so as soon as you start to speak, please say who you are and what you do. We have people from Italy, from Sweden, from Turkey, from United States of America. It's important to see how you in America, you perceive Europe, and last but not least, from Italy. So let's have a first question, and let's start bold, young girls and boys. If you were to write, I would say, the first lines of a new European manifesto, one that reflects your generation's hopes, fears, and even priorities, what would it say? You have, each of you, 1 minute to tell us what will be this new manifesto for Europe. Azi, let's start. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Azi Anyali. I am an investor in the mental health sector. I have an early stage venture fund which invests in AI, and I have a foundation which also invests in the mental health sector. So my first top line take.
And you are, even if coming from an amazing family of entrepreneurs in Italy, you are the granddaughter of the great late Gianni Agnelli. So please.
You can say that, but I can't.
This is why I take the freedom to say it.
So my top line comment would be around Europe is it's time. Europe will not fall to decline. It's a moment where we need to come together and really think about how can we collectively innovate and think about how not to have a reliance on other superpowers. I think it's a moment where us as Europeans really need to think about why we are fundamentally so special and why we are, if you were to think about Europe as a person, if you were to think about Europe as a continent, if you were to break down, sorry, this is a little bit nervous, but if you were to think about Europe as a human, what would be so special about it? And it would be its ability to unify and to be elegant and to be sophisticated and to care about its people. And I think now is the moment to really go into what makes us so powerful. And that would be my top line comment.
Excellent. Elsa.
Yes, my name is Elsa Highland. Very happy to be here. Born and raised in Stockholm, Sweden. I am an angel investor, investing agnostically, half into kind of general agnostic impact, but half into health as well. Previously VC operational at tech startups and scale-ups. I'm very fortunate to have grown up in that environment in Stockholm also, where it's been buzzing previously. So if I were to kind of build on to what you're saying in terms of a manifesto, it would be around Europe got to stop watching the world and actually instead start leading it, and at least leading from its position that we're in, by being bold in vision through innovation. And I think that is the absolute where we have been, but we will also have to catch up in order to have a future.
Semil.
Thank you very much. Arthur Königsberg from France. Eurocreative, a French.
Arthur, sorry.
A French think tank about Central and Eastern Europe, with the main objective is to make a rapprochement between France and this European region. Your question is difficult because it is very difficult to speak for all European youth. Of course, we don't all think alike, but I will speak for the European youth that I met during my travel and fun like that. I think today we are united by the will to stop to being weak and naive. And we are united by the will to create a true European power We don't want to suffer the events of the 21st century. We want to play our part and be important actors in the world. So we are aware that we need to strengthen the European Union and its competitiveness. And like President Macron said this morning, we need to build a strong, strategic European autonomy. And we have to keep in mind, particularly in France, or Germany, or in Belgium, or in Italy, or in Spain, that old Europe is not Europe. There is a new Europe today with Poland, with Romania, with Bulgaria, with Czech Republic, with Lithuania, Estonia, Finland, Sweden, and maybe tomorrow with Balkans. With Balkans and Ukraine and Moldova and Serbia, Kosovo, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Montenegro, Albania, of course. And we have to be able to welcome them in a strong Europe tomorrow.
Are you ready to do so? Do you think everyone is ready to do so?
All candidates?
No, to include all these countries,
No,
all these different cultures.
I think, yes, of course, we need institutional reforms today. But we have to keep in mind that this process of enlargement is a real test for the credibility of Europe. Because this enlargement makes a big question. Our model based on prosperity, sovereignty shared, reconciliation, has to work everywhere in Europe. Not only in the Western or Eastern, but also in the Balkans, where there are historical and political tensions, of course, but a lot of strong political and economic opportunities.
Jared, how do you see Europe from America?
Yeah, so I love Europe, but I just wish it wasn't so...
Explain first who you are and what you do.
Sorry.
Jared.
I'm Jared Matfis. I'm a founder of an investment firm called Bombadil. We do early stage venture all the way through publics and liquids. We love Europe. However, I think I speak for many Americans when we just wish it was less committed to killing itself. We look at the events happening, Russia-Ukraine breaks out, Germany over-reliant on Russian energy, and how does Germany respond to this? They destroy their nuclear reactors. These are decisions that are completely nonsensical and almost look like a country is committed to its own destruction. So as an American, there's some bright spots that we can look at. You look at Estonia, they have, I think it's 7.8 unicorns per million person as a per capita, way ahead of the rest of Europe. And there's a series of very intentional things that happen there that the rest of Europe should probably follow. They start teaching children how to code in first grade. They simplified their tax structure. They made it very easy to hire non-EU citizens to companies. You can register a company from your phone in less than an hour. In Germany, if you want to register a new startup, you have to hire a notary to literally sit there and read aloud every single line with your investors. It makes no sense. And there are a series of policies where if the EU was to adopt them, and broader Europe was to adopt them, this could be a real economic block. But right now, I look at it as a great training ground for engineers to come to American companies and help us get rich. So, there's hope yet, but I haven't seen it.
Semil, tell us more about what your organization is doing and how do you see Europe new manifesto?
I would say that we should start by acknowledging what came before us had wisdom. We should say, I guess it was last week that we had the 75th anniversary of Schuman Declaration, which then laid the ground for what then became the European Union. So in recognizing that there is wisdom in what came before us, I think Europe should stay vigilant to the changing landscapes. It is a system, it is a union that allowed for great economic expansion, that allowed for great unity. But now, as Europe faces greater challenge from its borders, from across the world, from perhaps from all corners of the world, I think we should say that Europe should always take into account the significance of clarity of process, clarity of truth, clarity of trust, and I would say clarity of purpose.
What do you think, and whoever wants to answer first, what do you think your generation should learn from the old generation, which is my generation, for example? Who wants to pick that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think the level of stability and peace that Europe had for so many decades is something that we should absolutely look to, right? The return to violence of the past few years has definitely been less than desirable, and hopefully we can go back to the extremely effective diplomacy that kept the region stable and prosperous for so long. But beyond that, I think we should really try and learn from a lot of the mistakes that were made, which is that you cannot regulate your way to prosperity, and hopefully that can change as more tech-forward members enter these parliaments and enter these governments and realize that the people making the decisions don't even understand what AI is, right? A European Parliament member here this week told me that AI means ChatGPT to many people in Brussels. So hopefully with education, which comes through youth, things can modernize.
Azi, what do you take from our generation?
I think that it's important for our generation to take what you guys have done and really think and actually do a moral inventory about us as a cohort of young thinkers and think, how do we bring back innovation into the next generation, and think about how can we be like-minded and thinking outside the box. I think there's been an over-reliance on technology, and I think it's to some degree stunted our creativity. And I think that now is the moment to take accountability for our actions as a youth and not be lazy and not rely on the past, and actually take what we've learned, take from history, and be bold and think outside the box and be forward thinkers, because right now we're at this flux position where we really need to be creative with our minds and really think about like global change on a macro scale.
Elsa, do you think you are living in the old continent?
I'm not sure old continent, but I'm living in a social welfare.
Old Europe.
Old Europe. I'm living in a social welfare which is built on an old Europe, and I think that is amazing from many point of views. You have a universal healthcare, education, and so on. But we're also then staggering in development, and I think that we did very well again, like in the end of 90s, beginning 2000, when internet, in high-speed internet in Sweden was democratized to everyone. In 2000, 51% of the household had internets at home, and I think that led to a speed of innovation, because we had companies that started, for example, Skype, that got sold to eBay, Microsoft, that allowed for both capital but also knowledge to be reinvested into the ecosystem. And that's how we have built that Nordic very strong scene, even the new Nordic scene on tech and innovation. But we have stalled, and education today, yes, I think it should be for everyone, but we have to democratize what's happening now in the space of innovation, especially AI, as we've spoken about today.
Arthur, what do you keep from our generation, and what would you reject from our generation?
I will begin by resilience. I think your generation was very resilient. And our generation needs to be very, very, very resilient, because the challenges are immense. Climate change, war in Europe today, war in the Middle East, and all challenge linked by the new technologies. And these challenges put any question for our generations, and we have to be very quick in the capacity to react on all these challenges. So I think we have to be more and more resilient today, and it is the lesson from your generation. But maybe what I will reject is not you, of course, but I think all generation was maybe a little bit naive. After 1991 and the end of the Iron Curtain, of the end of the communism, we gave up strategic position or strategic tools and the capacity to be powerful in a dangerous world.
Emil, what do you keep and reject from our old generation?
I would say, with a single word, that it would be prudence of the older generation. The older generations have seen far catastrophist demolition. I would say human tragedies such as war, greater wars, I would say. And with that, of course, came the necessity of prudence, especially in developing legislation that then sought to uphold the dignity of every European citizen. But I guess what our generation can add on to that would be agility, especially as to adjust to the new situations, to be responsive, especially in the age of AI, in the age of a necessity of environmental stewardship, and especially in the age of ever closer armed conflicts. We have to stay responsive without giving up prudence that the older generations developed.
You are so privileged, all of you, because you are almost all entrepreneurs. But a question where you answer yes or no. Are you concerned by jobs in Europe for your generation?
No.
I think it's a more complex question. I think we will have other type of jobs. For the ones that we have right now, yes, I am. But I do think that we have to move, and that is also part of our education going forward. Should it be super high quantum engineering math as education for that we try to bring in the best people for, and then maybe move into blue-collar jobs?
Arthur?
Yes.
Yes or no?
No.
Jared?
Yeah, I'm extremely concerned about jobs in Europe. People will be employed, but Europe is largely becoming a consumptive economy. When you look at like the largest driving force of what's going to happen in the world, it's clearly AI. And much of the regulation around climate rules and energy production is forcing Europe to fight with one arm tied behind its back. So, maybe there'll be companies that people will be employed by, but in the long run, as AI automates larger and larger swaths of the global economy, it's going to go to the countries that have the engineering talent, the data center capacity, and the energy. And I'm not really seeing too much of that build out in Europe right now.
Cyril?
Yes, I would say that Europe has yet to fully experience the reshaping of the job sector and the job needs, especially in the face of AI and automation and the dislodgement that these two create. So yes, I am a bit concerned as to how continent will...
So to help you to maybe have a better opinion, I will call our CEO of the FII Institute, Penny Richards. We just conducted a great survey about the future of work. And Penny will share with us the outcome of this survey. Penny, the floor is yours.
Richard, thank you. And thank you. It's so interesting hearing you, and I hope I can share a bit more information and find out what you think about it. I mentioned this morning that one of the pillars of the FII Institute is a pillar called Think, and we concentrate a lot on that, on knowledge building and thought leadership. And today, we are launching the 3rd edition of FII Institute's Global Future of Work. This one, in particular, is focused on Europe, which is one of the reasons we're here. Some of what I'm going to tell you is going to confirm some of what you think. So let me just explain a bit more about the study. It drew on surveys of 1,900 business leaders and 1,200 young Europeans in 30 countries, plus quite a few expert interviews. So just very quick snapshot for you. We found stark facts. European productivity grew only 0.3% in the last 5 years, compared with over 25% in the US. It's also stark on demographics. The working age population will shrink by 15% by 2050, and 6 in 10 European CEOs already report talent shortages, especially in advanced IT and coding. And another stark statistic from our survey, Europe's largest firms underinvest by $450 billion each year in AI, data platforms, and other digital assets compared with US counterparts. Richard, one more thing very quickly, because I think this will help your conversation. Excuse me.
Please.
Thank you. So what other young Europeans told us in this survey? They told us they are not being prepared for the future of work. 80% of those surveyed said that classroom learning is irrelevant for them to find what they consider to be real jobs. And more than half feel underprepared for modern-day European workforce. 3 out of 4 say tech skills are undertaught, and more than half say the same for teamwork, creativity, and problem solving. And half, I promise my last, Richard, half cite lack of internships or hands-on experience as the top barrier to employment, yet 44% say they fill that gap themselves with online learning and other part-time work or working with startups. So interesting to see what you think, and thank you.
Thank you, Penny. Thank you very much. How do you want to react? Who wants to react to this survey? Azzy, oh, I see a lot of reaction. Azzy, please, go ahead.
Fundamentally, I'm not surprised by what you said at all, which is why fundamentally we're all here to think about how can we change that narrative. The reason why I said no is because what's the point in being pessimistic, because this is our reality. I couldn't be less surprised by any of the statistics that you've just said, but we're at a flux point that it's like, okay, we need as a collective to all come together and think, how do we change that? And I think that's why we're all here on this panel, because we don't want to see a decline in Europe. So that's kind of my top line comment as to why I'm here, is how can we be helpful to our generation with you guys? How can we stop that being the reality? And it is fundamentally down to the education system. It's down to a lack of energy, it's a lack of inspiration, and I think now is really the moment where we can link political leaders and really link people, like-minded individuals and next gens to really kind of incentivize the next workforce.
But do you think, I will come to you in a minute for your comments, but do you think the current education system is appropriate, or it is just creating, I would say, workers for past jobs?
I had this conversation earlier or yesterday with my fiancé, and I've always been kind of, well, I didn't really like school, and he's more of an academic, and we've all heard the kind of, why are we learning about Pythagoras' theorem when we should be learning about how we should do our taxes? So I don't think it's necessarily the issue with the education system. It's more about how do we keep what exists, but evolve with it and bring in new formats and new curriculum. And I think fundamentally my manifesto is, I think there should be a curriculum around self-reliance, self-resilience, and how do you learn how to have accountability for your actions, because the ripple effect of being able to self-regulate as a human has a ripple effect on society.
Elsa, how do you react to this report? And do you think the Swedish, Scandinavian, in fact, education system is different from the education system of the other European countries?
How I react to the report, I think it's good that we get numbers on hand, because it really proves that we have to make a change, period, and especially with politicians and policymakers around how we're built up our schools and education systems. In terms of what Sweden does differently, in Sweden we own our own IP, and I think we're the last country in Europe, at least at research level, that does that, and that both leads to more companies starting out of research, because you have an upside of it. But on the other hand, we have strong universities. If you look at the top 100 in Europe and even in the world, both in business and technology. So we have good school systems. But on the other hand, by owning your own IP, there's no incentive for the schools to improve, because they cannot be part of that upside. And I think that is an issue, to be honest.
How do you see from America the European? How do you see from America the European education system?
Yeah, so I mean, you hear all these stories about how much better the schools are here, and all the international competitions. They say, oh, Finland outperforms the U.S. across all this. But I think that there's a fundamental disconnect between having high test scores and necessarily like creating output for the world. I myself, I'm a high school dropout. Most of my friends in New York that have built incredible companies, same in the Valley, similarly dropped out of college. There's an infinite amount of information for anyone that wants it online. All of Harvard is available online, same with Stanford, same with Yale. Their entire catalogs, videos. So for anyone that wants to, you can have literally the best education in the world from your laptop. The #1 performing elementary, middle, high school in the US is a group called the Alpha School now, which has kids doing 2 hours a day of self-directed learning with social and socializing, building activities through the rest of the day. So I think that education will matter less and less, and what will matter more and more is agency. And I worry that the lack of agency, or people thinking that social mobility is less in some of these European countries where there's less stories of people truly rising from nothing up, where there's more stasis. I think that saps away at the agency, and agency combined with the infinite resources online is what leads to these incredible outcomes.
Arthur, I left France 20 years ago, but for the past 40 years, each time someone tried to reform the education system in France, we were going to strikes. How do you see this education in crisis or not, and how do you react to Penny's comments on the survey we had?
I'm not surprised with this survey, but I want to put the point on one thing. It's not just the educational system. Now we have question of education, yes, in school, in university, of course, but also at home. And I think we don't make this point at the center of the subject. What is to be a parent in this 21st century? How do you transmit this taste for effort, for creativity, for take some initiative? And I'm a new parent, so I ask some questions for myself, and I'm trying to balance how can I protect my child by the new technologies threat. I think it's a central subject for our generation. How can we launch our child in this 21st century?
Semil, let's go to another question about AI. We cannot have this conversation with you young people unless we talk about AI. Do you think AI has a chance to bring Europe on the top of the winners, or do you think we are behind the curve?
I think the first thing that comes to my mind is EU's AI Act. EU's AI Act outlines a lot of preventive measures. For example, when it was ratified, there were provisions about if an AI poses a credible and perhaps a very high level of threat, then it would not be allowed to work within the boundaries of the European Union. So I would say that it is really great that the European Union is taking steps to protect its citizens against possible dangers of AI. But I think the most important thing that we, especially as the younger generation, should take into account is that Europe should stay vigilant against lagging behind in terms of competitiveness, because we're seeing that the AI and the innovation it drives, I think it lays the foundation for what will, especially in our world, in our future world, will become a global hub for innovation. So I think Europe should stay vigilant to that.
Elsa, you invest a lot on AI. How do you react to that?
But I think that, of course, it comes maybe from a good place, but the whole problem with Europe is bureaucracy, and the AI State of AI Act is just a very clear example. Like, even before we have the policies in place and the regulations in place, it's outdated. And it's like, AI is like a teenager, doesn't know how to dress. It's so ambivalent, and we need to move away from that and have more flexible regulations and policies maybe that can adapt over time for us to move forward. But I also think we've already lost that race, and AI 100%, it's gone. And I think that we just have to be proactive to take what is the next step. Well, like, what can we do next? Because we're already behind there. What can we do next to be proactive?
Arthur, AI, how do you see AI in Europe? How do you see that being an opportunity, a trap, a risk for you guys?
Yes, it's an opportunity for Europe if we increase our competitiveness in this area. Of course, a lot of questions are coming in Europe on this subject, but I think a lot of European political leaders are very aware about this problematic, like President Macron, and it's a central subject for the summit this Monday in France, Choose France. IA is a central subject. So I think we are very aware, but we have to be very, very, very fast in our capacity to reform our system to be more competitiveness.
Azi, do you think AI will help on mental health issues?
I mean, the real crux of it all is AI isn't going anywhere. So it's not really, there's no point really debating as to whether or not it serves a purpose in our society, because it's here and it's about evolving and it's about having an understanding of the fact that it's artificial intelligence, which fundamentally means that it's way more powerful than the sapient brain. So we now just need to think about, okay, having an educational conversation with children about the powers and properties that it has, but thinking about ways in which this can be a tool and this can be used and we can coexist alongside artificial intelligence. It's not one or the other. I think from a mental health perspective, I think it's an incredible tool in terms of self-regulation. I think it can be amazing for stress regulation. I think it can be incredible as a voice for someone to communicate with. And I think that I think done correctly, I think it can be used amazingly, but I think, like everything, it's about having an awareness that something that has a huge power over us it's like what comes up must come down. So it's just having an awareness of something that's more powerful than us, and it's just an ego game with humans.
Last question, short answer. If you have one piece of advice to give to European world leaders, what it would be? Starting from the right to the left. Semil.
Sure. When I think about this question, there is a Roman phrase that comes to my mind. I think it was first used by Cicero, the Roman statesman. It says, summum jus summa injuria, which roughly translates, the rigid law becomes great damage. Rigid law becomes great injustice. I think that finds some great resonance with what President Macron earlier today said, with a call to streamline the regulations, not to abandon them, because oversight is clearly a foundational component of European democracy, but I guess it would be to streamline and push forward for progress.
Jared, what would be your piece of advice?
Yeah, just
not to President Trump, to European leaders.
Of course, no, just deregulate everything. I know you say that it's a core principle of the European process, but you can't have a system when you try to tax and prevent all that can grow. So the EU trying to regulate AI when there is no AI in Europe is like me trying to regulate being 7 feet tall. This has literally nothing to do with me. So hopefully Europe can create an environment where companies can flourish and founders feel comfortable staying here, and there's resources that are available to them. And I would encourage the great families of Europe to invest huge amounts of money in random smart kids. If you're a 17-year-old kid that can code little things together, there's a ton of capital in the US. There's 1 million fellowships and things that great entrepreneurs and founders and universities have made available for our students that don't really exist here. So instead, the European ones apply to ours. So I would encourage the great families to set up those programs and fund these kids, and then give them more follow-on capital, and for the government to not prevent them from using the AI tools that will make them competitive in the global economy, because if you're not using these AI tools, your companies are simply going to fail compared to ones that will.
Arthur?
Yes, one advice is for the political leaders in Europe is to be more unified. Because now in Europe, we are facing a lack of unity in Europe. Because I think strong leaders didn't understand the diversity of Europe. The European Union was built in one slogan: united in the diversity. So all political leaders have to know better each country, each economic interest, each strategic environment. And so when our leaders will now know better the European countries, we will be more unified and more powerful.
Elsa?
Yeah, I think as to President Macron's speech earlier, I agree with a lot, but him including a lot of various other people are missing the how. And I want to know more about the how. How are we going to do that? And I would say with that, like include us also in the conversations because we have the ears on the ground and we know what's happening. And I think that we can run with speed if you have people at the European Commission that now I'm just talking in general, but they might not even know what's going on in tech. Maybe you have to have parallel discussions to bring up.
Thank you. Azi?
I echo what all of you guys said, and I think it's just more, let's stop talking and start doing, and let's just kind of get on with it, because I think now's the moment, and us as a cohort of future generation, we want to work. It's not that we want to sit and do nothing. We want to be inspired. We want to innovate, and we just haven't had the tools, the materials, or innovation. And I think really as someone who genuinely wants to see the world succeed and pioneer the future of a new world of peace and have a holistic awareness of a happy society. I think it's, use us. We want to help and we want to be a part of the future.
Azi, Elsa, Arthur, Jared, Semil, thank you very much for this moment.